Serial killers, they are a product of the times, and these are bloodthirsty times. Even psychopaths have emotions if you dig deep enough, but then again, maybe they don't. I'll tell you what, I gave up on love and happiness a long time ago.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back for another Twisted Tea video. So Netflix just released their new docu-series, Night Stalker, The Hunt for Richard Ramirez, about this serial murderer, and while it was well done, it was not nearly as satisfying as I wanted it to be, and it left us wondering and fiending for more information. The docu-series was narrated by the detectives involved in the case at the time, and that's all well and good, but we got more backstory on the detectives than we did on Richard Ramirez or his victims. They literally summed up Ramirez's entire childhood in 2 or 3 short sentences in the last episode, and I'm confused as to why his childhood didn't make the cut. Can we even see the full picture without that vital information? We need to talk about this. When I heard that this docuseries was going to be produced, I was so anxious to watch it. And then I heard that it was being advertised as a limited series with only 4 episodes, and I was even more intrigued. I thought that for Netflix to be considering this a documentary series, it was going to be very difficult for them to fit everything about this case into 4 one-hour-long episodes. And I think that they definitely made the wrong choice. Like I mentioned, we saw way more backstory on the detectives than we did on Richard Ramirez or his victims. I wanted to know who and why they made this decision. So before we get too far into it, I wanted to mention a clip that I found on the Netflix UK and Ireland YouTube channel of a man named Tiller Russell explaining why he wrote Night Stalker the way he did. Netflix is pretty strict with their copywriting, so I won't be able to show very much of the clip, but I wanted to point out that it's in the description box in case you guys wanted to watch it. In a nutshell, he talked about how he believes that Ramirez has become a sex icon, and he wanted to point out that he's a child molester and a sadistic monster. I'll give him that. I had never heard about the child abductions before I watched this so-called docu-series. I wasn't surprised, but it did catch me a little off guard. He also talked about how when a serial killer is captured, the victims become metaphorical footnotes in the killer's story, which was another good point. I completely understand wanting to show the humanity of his victims, survivors, their families, and the detectives who are still haunted to this day by what they endured. Russell goes on to explain that he sees Richard Ramirez as a, quote, pop culture icon. He wanted to tell the story, but didn't want to reward all of the horrific behaviors of Richard Ramirez by glorifying him in any way. Again, good point, but you could have given us the full story without glorifying him. I mean, you named the series Night Stalker, for goodness sakes. You didn't name it The Detectives Who Caught the Night Stalker. I feel like we've been a little misled. There is so much more to Richard Ramirez's story than the 2 short sentences that they gave us, and if we're being real, the detectives figured out who he was, but this was the most epic citizen's arrest in history. Now that that's all out of the way, let's really talk about Richard Ramirez and what led up to the small amount of information that Netflix decided to give us. Richard Ramirez was born on February 29, 1960 in El Paso, Texas. That's right, Leap Day. He was the youngest of 5 children. Richard's mother worked at a boot factory and his father worked on the Santa Fe Railway. Richard's father frequently had violent outbursts and physically abused all of his children. He spent the majority of his time out of the house and away from the family, traveling with the railway. Because his father was always gone and his mother worked full-time too, the older children started getting high and causing trouble, and Richard spent most of his time with a babysitter. When he was 2 years old, a dresser fell on his head and he was rushed to the hospital with a concussion. He received 30 stitches in his head. A couple years later, Richard was at a playground pushing a swing when it knocked him unconscious, and again, he was sent to the hospital and received stitches in his head. A lot of times, head trauma in early childhood is attached to these psychopaths. When Richard was in 5th grade, he had a seizure at school, and it was the first of many. He was subsequently diagnosed with epilepsy, and the seizures continued until he was a teenager. Richard had an older cousin named Mike, and he was a war hero. He had done 2 tours in Vietnam, and Richard idolized him. When Mike returned to the States after his last tour, he took Richard under his wing. He would talk to him and explain in great detail the things that he had seen and done while he was overseas, and even showed Richard Polaroid pictures of women that he had claimed to have raped and murdered. Mike also taught Richard things that he had learned while training for combat about how to be stealthy and sneaky, and taught him how to fight and kill. Mike's wife didn't appreciate him spending so much time with the young Richard Ramirez and wanted him to get a job. And Mike didn't appreciate the nagging, so he shot her in their kitchen in front of their 2 young children and Richard. After Mike went to prison for his wife's murder, Richard became obsessed with killers, crime, and death, and started reading detective magazines. Richard also admitted later that this is around the time that he started fantasizing about the violent sex acts that he had seen in those Polaroids. His grades started to slip, and he was stealing and getting high daily. As punishment, his father would beat and torture him. Richard claimed that his father even took him to a cemetery one night and left him chained to a cross overnight. After this incident, Richard moved in with his older sister and her husband, Roberto. There was no structure in the home, and Roberto was a peeping Tom. He frequently took Richard along with him for his joy rides. He also started to teach Richard how to be stealthy and not detectable. When Richard was 15, he got a job at their local Holiday Inn and obtained a master key to all of the guest rooms from a coworker. He started to watch the guests through their windows and would sneak in while they were out and take valuables that had been left in the room. One day, Richard waited in a room for a female guest to come out of the shower, and he attacked her and tried to rape her. Luckily, her husband walked in and fought Richard off. The charges were eventually dropped because the couple refused to come back to El Paso to testify against him. As soon as Richard turned 18, he took off. He couldn't wait to be on his own and be able to do whatever he wanted whenever he wanted without answering to anyone. He became addicted to cocaine and was burglarizing homes to get by. He was a drifter and was sleeping wherever he found fit for the night, including unlocked cars, sidewalks, and motel rooms if he found money in a home that he had robbed to be able to pay for it. While on a bender one night, Richard was getting high with a woman when he started making sexual advances toward her. When she turned him down, he brutally raped her. Richard started to read books by the founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, and he attended one of LaVey's ceremonies in San Francisco. After the ceremony, Richard called his mother and told her that he had been touched by Satan. But it sounds to me like he had already been touched by Satan long before that ceremony, though. Anywho, after this phone call, Richard lost touch with everyone in his family. His cocaine addiction continued to grow, and he was living in 2 different motel rooms in San Francisco's Tenderloin district, when a 9-year-old girl named May Linda Lay Young was found stabbed to death in her apartment building in the same district. Ramirez's DNA was matched to the crime scene after he was arrested later. Around this time, Richard moved back to LA. One night, he broke into the home of a 79-year-old woman who was sleeping inside. When he found that she didn't have anything worth stealing, he was irate and stabbed her to death in her sleep. After this attack, he bought a gun, and that's when the Night Stalker killings officially started. For the next 5 months, he grew increasingly more violent and killed at least 14 more people and raped and attacked several others. And this is where the Netflix series decided to pick up. I don't believe that there is anything to glorify there. He has been seen as a sex symbol over the years and received a massive amounts of attention for the first time in his life. After his arrest, he was even known to have 12 to 15 girlfriends at a time, which is absolutely disgusting to me. He's a Satan-worshipping monster and a bum, literally. His teeth were despicable, and the survivors of his attacks describe a stench emanating from him that was almost as unbearable as the torture they endured. In the words of the great Bailey Sarian, "Get better idols, people." Psychiatrist Michael H. Stone wrote in his book, Personality Disordered Patients, Treatable and Untreatable, that Richard Ramirez was, quote, a made psychopath and not a born psychopath. And I have to say that I agree 100%. That boy never stood a chance. Thanks for attending my TED Talk. Do you all agree that they could have given us Richard Ramirez's full story without glorifying him? Or do you think that they took the right approach? Let me know down below what you guys thought of the docu-series. I'm curious to see if you agree with me or if I'm just a psycho who enjoys this stuff a little too much. I'll see you all down in the comments. Peace and love.